Hey Paul, great to have you on.
Hey guys, how are you keeping?
Yeah, very well. So, Division 1 Group A as follows this weekend. We have Cork against Clare on the Saturday. We have on the Sunday Wexford Limerick. We have Galway, Henry Shefflin and co taking on Offaly. That's 2 o'clock on the Sunday. And then Division 1 Group B, we'll have Laois Tipperary on Saturday evening. And then Brian Cody, season 24, takes charge once again as Kilkenny take on Antrim, and then Dublin, who've had a very good start to 2022, take on Waterford at 4:45. So, given your Limerick credentials, we might start there for a moment. You were very much part of the panel that made this breakthrough in 2018, this first breakthrough since 1973. It now feels very much as if these boys are in dynasty building mode. 2018, 2020, 2021, I suspect they're still angry that they're not going for five in a row, and will feel that they should be going for five in a row, and they look odds on to win league if they're in the mood, and championship again this year.
Yeah, look, I suppose the last couple of weeks there have even boded well for the season ahead with the amount of young players that got game time, and I suppose the training would have been really good the last couple of weeks with those lads having the confidence of those two games against Kerry and Clare in the Munster Hurling Cup. But yeah, going down to Wexford is going to be a really tough one. I think it's a good first start for Limerick, kind of refocus the mind for training over the last couple of weeks since they've come back from their holidays and stuff. Because Wexford Park's a really difficult place to go. And last time, 2017 down there, anyway, John's first actually game in charge got turned over down there as well. You know, so it's a hard place to go. It would have focused the mind for training over the last couple of weeks. I'd say John and Paul and Co would have used it as well. As a kind of a stick to beat the lads with the last couple of weeks just to make sure they're ready for this one.
Paul, what's the big difference with where Limerick were in 2017, 2018 as they were climbing the mountain and where they are now?
The big change came in winter 2017 there after we got beaten by Kilkenny. Like lads had a good period in the gym there, but it just seems as if everything that Paul was trying to get across to the team had clicked really. You know, it's like it took a bit of time to bed in, and even a bit of extra time after we'd been knocked out, it even helped a bit. But when we came back in 2018, it just felt like fellas were comfortable in what they've been asked to do, and Paul then obviously could turn the heat up in training a bit more and get fellas to do a bit more in training and test them a bit more. And I think that just fellas thrived on it and just excelled and just went on to new levels after that, you know. And they're still going. Like, I mean, watching them last year, even the stuff they're able to do now it seems like a far cry even from when I was around, you know. But they're just incredible.
So what kind of stuff in particular?
It's like it's their there's no major secrets, Jory. It's just putting yourself under pressure the whole time, like, you know, in training, and just testing you really, really difficult and really hard situations, and just testing your core skills and just testing your fitness and how long you can go on it. Like, it's that cliche, it's tougher than, but it really is like.
Oh, we're just having a problem.
Really, really hard.
Your line, Paul. So we might just get you back in a better line in just a second. Apologies for that. Just the Wi-Fi's a touch in and out. But Jamesie O'Connor, you are on the line now. Hey, Jamesie.
Joe, how are things?
Yeah, very well. So I know you joined us a touch late there. We were just making the point with Paul Browne that it really does feel as we head into 2022 that it's Limerick and a considerable gap to the rest. And there's no obvious sign of that letting up, to be honest.
No, Joe. I mean, you know, all the evidence is that, you know, they've put more distance between themselves and the opposition of the chasing pack as the season and the years have gone on. And I suppose you look at the teams that maybe have challenged them in recent years, you know, Tip obviously lost Pádraig Maher during the week. Brendan has retired. You know, change of management, so they're in transition. Galway, Joe stepped away. You know, Henry's there now. They're in transition and maybe haven't found or brought through maybe as many young players in recent years as they'd liked. You still feel it's maybe an older team, and you know, Henry obviously have a job to put his stamp on it, and it'll be really interesting to see where they are. Kilkenny again, look at TJ's a year older. Can he keep producing the magic that he's consistently produced? You know, so it's hard to see where, you know, outside of Waterford really, and maybe, you know, Cork obviously, I think last year's final showed that they still have a way to go to get to where Limerick are at. So for me, yeah, it's Limerick. You know, I can't see beyond them, Joe, to be honest about it. And I think they're going from strength to strength. They tick all the boxes in terms of the age profile, the resources. They've got, you know, the best coaching ticket, a manager who knows what it's about, and all the signs are that they've got the panel and the depth and all those other things that they're required to go on and do it again. So yeah, but Joe, look at this. We're back to the round robin. Who knows? A couple of key injuries. Maybe those games in Munster will take a bit more out of them. But I can't see beyond Limerick, you know, the evidence we've seen to date.
Yeah, 2020 they beat Waterford in that COVID final in December by 11 points, and then last year you just have to remind yourself the exhibition almost they put on in the All-Ireland final against Cork. So the final score 332 to 122, a 16 points winning margin. They were up by 13 at half time. Keane Lynch was superhuman, the highest winning score in an All-Ireland final. It trumped Kilkenny in 08 against Waterford. And Paul, I know you're back with us. Just looking at the odds to get a sense even of what the bookies are feeling about things. Limerick are odds on to win the All-Ireland this year, and then they have Galway second favourites around 7-1 territory, and then there's a bunch all at 10-1. Kilkenny, Cork, Tipperary, Waterford, and a bit of a gap then to Clare. I don't usually bring in odds into conversations, but I'm curious to see how big a gap is perceived to be out there. That's a massive gap, and again Limerick odds on here. Do you see any potential, barring significant injuries to key players, do you see anything that can stop Limerick this year?
It's hard to tell, really. I mean, like, the league will tell a lot, you know. But I think it's interesting that Cork haven't been seen yet, you know, and obviously have been training hard over the last while, and will be probably looking to make amends for last year, you know. I'd be really interested, especially they have a couple of new in the backroom teams under as well. So that'll be interesting to see how that works out from going forward into the league, and just interested to see how they get on against Clare now in the first round.
On Tipperary, Jamesie, you mentioned Paddy Maher's retirement. Colin Bonner described that as a total shock. So, I mean, 33 years of age, Maher was still there with plenty to offer behind the scenes as a standard setter, on the pitch as well. 6-time All-Star, triple All-Ireland winner. It's worth just noting what an unbelievable player he's been over the last decade.
Yeah, unbelievable, Joe, and the service he's given it, the service that both himself and Brendan Maher have given. And it's not just, I suppose, what they did on the pitch. I mean, you know, he was obviously the far larger, the strong man, you know, the guy that really set the tone, I think, for Tipperary, particularly in the bigger matches. But it's also probably what he does in terms of, you know, the leadership he gives in the dressing room, the standard he sets, you know, in training on and off the field. And you know, he's been you know, a phenomenal player for them. And you know, it's a big loss. And as I said, Colin Bonner, you know, on that quote was blindsided by it, didn't see it coming. And it's not a decision, I'm sure, that Paddy made lightly. Obviously, the injury. I mean, I think the report I read, he's stepping away from club hurling as well. So it's clearly something that he has to take very, very seriously. And you know, it's a medical decision, and one I'm sure he'd prefer not to have to make. But yeah, it's a big loss to Tipperary. And you know, you just wonder, you know, that if the players were there and if the young talent had been there, you know, last year and the year before, you know, it's inconceivable that Liam Sheedy wouldn't have brought them through. And yet he seemed to be going back to the old guard, because clearly he felt that they were the best players available to him. So again, it's going to be really interesting to see and try to get a gauge, you know, of where Tip are at. Now, you'd imagine that they'll have too much for Laois this weekend, but the acid test comes next weekend, Joe, when I think they're home to Kilkenny, and there'll be a good bit clear as to where they stand, at least early on after that game.
Paul, Jamesie raises the exact thought I have in Tipperary as well, which is that Liam Sheedy, for much of last year, would have heard the talk in the county of the need to freshen things up and bring through younger players, and I'm sure he would have been cognisant of the need to do that himself, and yet whatever he saw behind the mainstays wasn't impressing him enough to pull the trigger. Have you any great sense of what is or isn't coming through in Tip?
I suppose I have a small bit from my previous role I had in LIT, and there is some really good talent there in Tipperary, Owen Connolly and Billy Seymour and co. And I remember I saw that final that they won, that Jake Morris scored the winning goal at Munster final, and that year they seemed to have a really good bunch coming through. I found it quite strange that more of them didn't make the breakthrough, really, or it weren't trusted maybe to make the breakthrough. I don't know what it was. I know Liam would have had a big connection to those players from back in 2010 and stuff, and it seems as if he kept going back to the well with those boys, trust them, and that's fair enough as well. But I thought potentially one of the downfalls maybe for him might have been that they didn't give a couple of younger lads and freshen up the team a bit more, and let those lads have a cut off of making the panel. And obviously if they see that they have a chance to get on the team, more fellas push on then, and that maybe raises Tip. Look, it'll be interesting to see what they do in the next couple of weeks and how many fresh faces we see with Tipperary, but there definitely is talent there, and they've a couple of medals to back it up as well. But I suppose we didn't see him last year, but I'd be hoping we might see some of them this year, really, to be honest.
And how many, based on what you saw, Paul, do you reckon could make the breakthrough and could have an impact at senior level?
There's definitely 4 or 5 lads there in Tip, you know. Paddy Cadell, I know Billy Seymour's gone off the panel, I think, but I thought he was a real big talent coming through.
Owen Connolly is a lad who could really make a push this year, and you'd be expecting more out of Rob Burns as well, I think, going forward as well. But there definitely is lads there, and the couple of lads have stepped away now and the opportunity is there, and obviously there'll be lads needed to fill the gap that Pádraig Maher's after leaving as well. So it'll be interesting to see what leaders step up in the next couple of weeks over the league. It's week on week, and you really do need leaders in the dressing room for that period of the year, because one loss, if it's not addressed properly in the dressing room and stuff, and fellas move on from it, can turn into 2 and 3, and then you're spiralling into a bad run coming into the championship, and there's no massive gap between anything this year because of the split season and stuff. So you really do. I think you'll see the league in hurling this year might be used as a bit of a platform, a springboard for lads teams in the championship, and they'll be looking to get results every week, I think.
The one team that did manage to catch Limerick over the last number of years is Kilkenny, obviously. They're without the Ballyhale contingent until post All-Ireland final, so that's February 12th. So they'll be back relatively soon. Maybe Cody will give them a rest after that final. It remains to be seen. He's heading into his 24th year, Jamesie. We might as well enjoy however much longer the Cody era goes on, because we're never going to see anything like this again.
No, unless John Kiley kind of stays on or whatever. But yeah, look at it's incredible, and you know, I mean, I know maybe there's been a sense in Kilkenny maybe in the last couple of years as there have been murmurings and maybe rumblings, and you know that maybe it's time for change. But I still feel, looking at Kilkenny, that this guy is probably getting the best out of the talent that is available to him, and they're always competitive. They always play to the final whistle. I mean, even the semi-final last year against Cork, I mean, they were dead and buried. They had no right to get back into the game, and yes, somehow, you know, manufactured that Adrian Mullen equaliser. You know, so like Brian has, you know, I think he's evolved. I think, you know, they're playing a different style to what they were. I think they have adapted. I think that maybe accusation that maybe they haven't evolved, I think isn't fair. We've seen them maybe play through the lines and so on. But the reality is that he doesn't have the same quality, you know, available to him that he had when that team were in their pomp with, you know, Owen Larkin and, you know, Henry, Eddie Brennan, you know, Richie Power. You know, I know I could keep going. I come from all those great players, particularly up front. You know, so. I still think, look, he feels himself that he's the right man for the job, that he's something to offer, and look, there's no reason to believe that things will be any different. Kilkenny will be competitive. Whether they have enough quality to go all the way, I think remains to be seen. But on any given day, and on a particular day, they've shown that if Limerick are maybe, you know, that 5% off it, Kilkenny, you know, have the ability and the physicality, you know, to go toe to toe with them. And you know, they're still going to be hard to beat any day they go out. But I don't see them as All-Ireland champions. And I still think that, like, you know, Limerick are a good bit ahead of Kilkenny at this point in time. And
that is more down to personnel and quality as opposed to style of play, because you are saying they have evolved.
Absolutely. And, you know, again, I think, you know, you look at the service that you know, Richie Hogan, Walter Walsh, and especially TJ have given. But those guys now are, you know, Colin Finlay was up to a couple of years ago as well. Those guys are probably in the twilight phase of their careers. And, you know, Owen Cody is probably the one guy that really looks like he's stepped up. Adrian Mullen, maybe not as influential last year, maybe as you know, we thought he might be. He's coming back from injury as well. So these guys now are the next wave. And you know, there's definitely talent in Kilkenny, but I don't think the same calibre of talent is there as, you know, was obviously for much of Cody's early tenure. But I mean, those players, the like of which JJ, Tommy Walsh, I could keep going, might never be seen again, Joe. So yeah, he's certainly making, I think, the best of what's available to him.
Where are you in Kilkenny, Paul?
Kind of similar to Jamesie, really. But I do feel that the point made there, where if Limerick are off, I think Kilkenny are the one team who might be able to get them there with the work rate and stuff, you know. I think, look, Limerick will try, of course, this year to emulate everything they've done previously, like, but the level they're at is so high and so hard to achieve that you really are just, there's one day that they slip up, you just be fearing that it might be Kilkenny under their end of it, you know. But because I suppose that 2019 was a real learning curve for the team as regards being off the pace slightly and just being caught by a team who are fully on the pace on the same day, you know. I do think they have that potential, but as James said, I don't see them as All-Ireland contenders. Maybe they'll be there thereabouts as always, you know, but then they have evolved their style of play, and they'll always get the most out of it. You see it filtering through to Ballyhale in the last couple of weeks even. It's the same story, always in with a shout at the end of the game, and just they'll catch you if they can at all, you know. But I think they do have that quality that other teams mightn't have as regards just that bit of, I suppose, I don't know if heart you might use as the word, but they could catch Limerick if they're on an off day, but I'm not sure other teams can get to that the way Kilkenny can.
Everyone's interested in Galway for obvious reasons. It's been an interesting January thus far. A couple of weeks ago against Dublin, they were beaten 329 to 19 points, which was a scoreline that caught the eye. Double scores defeat. In the aftermath of that, Jamesie, Henry Shefflin was saying, well, look, we're making lots of changes. We're looking for players. So I don't know, on the basis of results like that, how many have they found?
Yeah, but I mean, again, I wouldn't read too much into that. I mean, Dublin looked, obviously beat Wexford last weekend in the Walsh Cup, and it was a pretty strong team. I think that Matty played, throughout that competition. So, I mean, this is the time to experiment. This is the time for Henry to find out, exactly what he has. What there's no doubt in Galway is that there's guys with underage pedigree, and guys that have All-Ireland minor medals, in their back pocket. So there has to be a certain level of talent in the county. But for some reason, Joe, and it kind of baffles me at times how you look at these guys as minors and you say, look, at this guy's a great prospect and that guy's a serious prospect, and yet they just don't seem to come through in the same numbers. And I don't know whether it's mentality, whether it's they have a lot of really, really good players at a particular level, but maybe not enough that are capable of maybe taking or playing at the elitist of that level or making that step up. So, but I think Henry will, he'll scour the county to see what he has. And as well as that, with Joe gone, again, other guys are going to have to step up. And he's going to have to give guys, their head, and he's going to have to experiment and see what he has. But again, listen, he's a guy with pedigree with Ballyhale, and you'd imagine that, come championship, Henry will have a fair idea what his best 15 are. And, Leinster is certainly winnable, and Galway are going to be thereabouts, you'd imagine, given, the experience, and there's still a lot of good players in that team that know how to win big matches. So, you'd imagine they're not going to be too far away. But yet again, I don't think Galway are at the level that Limerick are at. But we're saying that about, I think, everybody. Yeah,
it's almost no slight on anybody to say that at this stage. Paul, I mean, I don't want to go too far on the Galway quality point, because to be fair, it's one game in January, so it counts for very little. Certainly, the night Henry was announced as manager, we had Eddie Brennan and Cyril Farallon, and Cyril was absolutely adamant that there is oodles of talent in the county.
Yeah, there is oodles of talent in the county. It's incredible the number of games and trophies they've won underage. We're always saying it, we're saying it every year, but even in the recent times they've upped it again nearly and consistently winning them, But I think, look, if Henry is brave and goes with young players, I think the team will thrive, to be honest with you. I think possibly Shane O'Neill maybe could have been braver in giving players a go in the last year, and I think it was a downfall of his, but I think it's there. I just think a manager has to take a gamble on the players, I think, the young players, and give them a go and kind of throw them in as deep and see what he has, see what they are, because I think the more that get an opportunity, they'll, like, all those players know each other and played with each other for years, and it's probably like a little team within a team nearly, I'd say, with the young fellas they have. It strikes me similar to what Limerick had there at one stage, the lads coming in with underage talent. It just takes a manager to be brave and to move on a few fellas, and when the time is right, and just get those young fellas in and throw them in at the deep end and see what they're made of, really.
What style of hurling are you anticipating from Shefflin with Galway, Paul?
I think he'll play to the players' strengths. They're well able to move the ball through the lines and through the hands and play it into the, Galway will play. I think they'll play a lovely brand of hurling, I think, with Henry. I think they'll mix that physicality that they have with that kind of Kilkenny off the cuff hurling. But I think they'll be cuter than that. Just that, it's not going to be direct hurling. I think they'll be well able to mix it up, and I think they'll try and take Limerick on through the lines as well, and ball to hand and stuff like that. I think it's the only way you can do it, really. I don't think you can go at Limerick by trying to play around them. I think you have to go at them kind of hammer to hammer, really. I think really is what might Kilkenny or Galway might do this year.
What about you, James? Is there anything, for instance, from his Ballyhale days that we could take as read for what he might bring to Galway?
Not unless he signs TJ in the transfer market, Joe. I think, listen, he's got a lot to learn, and he knows that himself about the players. He'd be familiar, obviously, with the older players, the Pádraig Mannions, the Carl Mannions, all those guys. But it's what the younger cohorts are. Can these guys, Donal O'Shea, these guys, can they make the step up? How far away from playing at that level, are they? And this is the time to find out. And he's obviously got a run of games that I think they're going to give guys, those opportunities and see what they have. But as Paul said, I think it's about playing to the strengths that you have. And Galway has, certainly those minor teams. They've stick men, they've guys that have, can score. But it's about finding them and finding the right combination of them. But it would be a worry for me, Joe, that since 2017, you'd have assumed that, Micheál Donoghue and Shane would have been bringing maybe one or two guys new, through every year. But they haven't. And I'm assuming that's because they haven't been there, or they haven't been good enough. And even the guys that maybe have stepped up to the team, Shane Cooney, Fintan Burke, are they really at the level of maybe some of the guys that they're replacing? I'm not sure that they are. And I still don't know, if the talent that we kind of maybe assume automatically is there in Galway, or that Cyril Farrell was alluding to, I don't know if it is there, but we're going to find out, and we'll be a lot wiser, by the time this league campaign is over.
Yeah, Paul, before we go, remiss of us not to mention All-Ireland finalists in Cork, and I suppose Waterford as well, if we're going back the last 2 years. So Cork are a coming force, there's no doubt about that, and yet they've had a very long time now to stew on a 16 points All-Ireland final defeat. That can break certain teams, an experience like that. You would hope that won't happen to Cork here. They've Clare first off on Saturday.
Yeah, that's a big game for both sides. I think Clare went out to kind of make a statement in the Munster Hurling Cup and try and maybe turn over Limerick for that victory and bit of silverware, regardless of what stage of the year. But I think it's another big game for Cork, as you said there. They've kind of been in the shadows for the last number of weeks, not really on show at all. And I think they would have gone away over the winter and done a lot of soul searching. And I think Gary Keegan there being added to the group, I think is a big thing. I think if they have addressed what happened last year and can move forward from that, and kind of use it positively in any sense, I think they could be in a good place for the year ahead, because if they don't, they could spiral after that, if the team doesn't address that kind of a loss correctly. But I think, look, he's a good fella, and I think he'll have that sorted. But
yeah,
it's a big game for Cork this weekend. I think they'll be looking for a big win.
Well, that's Saturday evening against Clare, and as you said, it's rare Gary Keegan hasn't had the magic touch wherever he's gone. We're just out of time, Jamesie, so I don't have time to ask you about Clare. We'll get to it, I'm sure, over the coming weeks. But Jamesie O'Connor, Paul Browne, thanks a million, fellas. Cheers.
Cheers, Joe.
Thanks, guys.